to this episode of Mad About Markets. I'm Ritu, with me as always, Mangalam. Hi, Mangalam.
Hi, Ritu. What are we going to talk about today? I mean, there's so many things that we've spoken about already.
Well, you know, it is one of the largest sectors for India.
Okay.
It is traditional, but we don't really put the tech angle to it as much as we should.
Is it what I'm thinking it is? Is it farming? Let's just say.
Well, it definitely is farming, but when you add tech to it, you get
Agritech.
And that's what is on top of mind, and that's what we speak about today on Mad About Markets. So let's dive right in. Agriculture is a critical sector. We, of course, know it contributes close to 18% to the country's GDP, and it employs more than half of the national workforce. So this gives you a sense of the importance of the sector, and we'll tell you why this itself presents an opportunity.
45% of the workforce accounting for just 18% of the GDP, and that's where efficiencies are needed, and that's where tech.
Spot on. And farm input and output, if you talk about the sector at large, they're huge industries in India. Agriculture inputs is essentially your seeds, fertilizers, agrochemicals, or any external thing that you put in the soil, which can help with the yield. And the output is essentially the crop yields. Now, these two are expected to be close to $86 billion and $30 billion industries by FY26.
A huge contribution. I mean, these are some numbers.
Yes, these are some of the numbers. In fact, India has the highest dependence on agriculture if you look at any other major economy. But despite the significance of all of this that we've been talking about, it suffers from low productivity. So when we compare the output per agricultural employee in India and the cereal yield per hectare, we see that India severely lags behind countries like the US, Brazil, China, and others as well. So there is hope on the horizon, and this is where we talk about the opportunity.
All right, so that's about agri. Let's talk about tech now. Here's the agri-tech. Here's where the tech comes in agri-tech, or agricultural technology. Simply the application of technology to produce more with less, to make farming process more efficient from field to monitoring the food supply chain itself. The agri-tech explosion is not just a possibility, but it's inevitable and the need of the hour. In fact, there are a few reasons why we say that, and that's what we talk about on Mad About Markets very often. What the underlying agri-market of almost $500 billion, and we have the current tech penetration of only less than 1%. So $493 billion, the underlying market size, with tech penetration sub 1%, and that's where the opportunities for growth are massive. Secondly, the rapidly rising internet and smartphone penetration in India that we talk about ever so often, the penetration going beyond just the metros, and that makes it ripe for tech adoption and transformation itself. And then you have the strong impetus coming in from the government with supportive policies. For instance, the government is developing an agri-stack in collaboration with Agritech to make it easier to bring various stakeholders together to improve agriculture in India, to boost access to credit, crop info, also providing subsidy up to 100% to promote Kisan drones uptake by farmers. A fund for agri-tech startups is also in the pipeline, and the ENAM, which is a platform that promotes better marketing opportunities for farmers to sell their produce through online competitive and transparent prices. So, I mean, it is a massive opportunity which is just there.
Yes, and the government push and the various factors you outlined. Let's bring in our guest to understand if that's really played out as we think it has. Welcome our guest now, Krishna, who is the co-founder and CEO at Cropin, and Shashank, the co-founder and CEO at DeHaat. Gentlemen, welcome to Mad About Markets. And Krishna, I'll start with you. How big do you think the potential of the agri-tech market can be given the under-penetration of tech in the sector at the moment?
I think Indian agriculture is poised to grow. If you look at in 2023, we hit the mark of $3.75 trillion economy, and 90% of the GDP comes from agriculture, and this deploys close to 47% of the total population in the country, right? So, and largely we depend on agriculture, right? If this improves, the whole country economy will also improve, because most of the people from the bottom of the pyramid are engaged into this. So I think there is a huge potential. If you look at the contribution from agriculture is around $400 billion, right? And just by adopting, making this whole agri-tech and digital connectivity, we can, the additional value can be created of almost around $95 billion in this industry. And this was a report reported by McKinsey in one of their reports. And I think I'm very much aligned with that. And we'll also see the contribution which will go to the livelihood of the farmer. It will increase by 25 to 30%.
Right, and Shashank, what would help in terms of policy intervention? I mean, which government policies, according to you, have moved the needle and which ones haven't?
The overall, the behavioral change, could not be ensured. I think one is the volatility, right? And right, I mean, because sometimes the storage restriction, the export restriction, and we all understand because there are many external factors. Policy makers basically they need to be cautious for. But in general, the overall, the volatility. The two is that still the overall licensing requirement, right? I mean, towards agri value chain, I think that's highly decentralized considering agri is a state subject in India. So, for example, you require licenses for each and every district, each and every crop, or the physical location, where I think the overall, the speed is slow. While the overall process is transparent, online now, very efficient, but still it's decentralized, and basically it has to be done in a piecemeal manner. But I think the way how overall things are moving, that's very encouraging. And I would repeat, I think the way how in general the policymakers are talking about the overall digital or the data stack, I think that is going to be a game changer, for the entire sector, because that will bring all the stakeholders at a common platform, to solve all the issues of Indian farmers.
All right, gentlemen, hold your thoughts. It's time for us to crunch the numbers. So let's get cracking. The Agritech Gross Merchandise Value, or GMV, that is projected to experience an 8-fold growth between 2022 and 2027, going from $4 billion all the way to $34 billion. And that is the number we're going to talk about. Now, within the Agritech segment, if you break it up into various sub-segments, they also present pretty big opportunities. For instance, the food crop segment alone is expected to grow from $3 billion all the way to $25 billion by 2027. Similarly, in fiber crop, you have a $1.5 billion opportunity, cattle and dairy, $3 billion, poultry, $2 billion, and aquaculture, another $1.5 billion. Putting together all of this, that is the $34 billion number that we're talking about. The largest chunk of it, of course, coming from the food tech market. So let's take a closer look at the food tech market itself. The opportunity, like we said, is $25 billion, but the underlying addressable market is expected to grow all the way to $341 billion come 2027, and that is an opportunity you do not want to miss.
Incredible growth trajectory, right? I mean, I was looking at all the segments, all of them growing anywhere between 6 to 8 times over the next 5 years in the GMV. But that's only about things that go into and come out of the ground. There is a big opportunity outside of that as well. Beyond the core agri-tech market that we speak about, there are a lot of incremental opportunities across the value chain, which includes the likes of trading and auction platforms, which are estimated to transact over $8 billion worth of produce. And that's where a lot of inefficiencies are already. Farm gate warehousing aims to manage more than $10 billion worth of agri commodities. Then there is quality assessment, which is projected to cover a GMV of $5 billion worth of produce itself. Agri fintech is another one which is expected to facilitate loan disbursals worth over $3 billion. So what does all of these things that I'm talking about mean? In the next 5 years, the Indian agri-tech industry itself is poised for a remarkable growth. What is remarkable? 50% compounding over the next few years. That would mean 8 to 10 unicorns, 2 to 3 public listings, and a positive impact. The most important one, a positive impact on 40 million plus farmers and users, which would mean that the potential increase in total farm income could surpass 100%, more than meeting the government's estimates.
Well, it's a farm of an opportunity, like you said earlier, right? So, Shashank, let me put that to you then. Within Agritech itself, since you're present across the spectrum, what are the fastest growing segments and the biggest opportunities that you see?
I think few specific things, which is the last mile digitization piece, because still the Indian farmers and 85% of the farmers are small. They need to be in the mainstream as far as their access to agri value chain services is concerned. So one is the overall last mile digitization, whether it's about digital farmer advisory or the farmer financing. The two is the post-harvest value addition, because every year we have 40% post-harvest loss within India. So the post-harvest value addition for the better price realization for the farmer. And last not the least is in general the export, considering the entire world is looking at India to solve the global food safety and security issue.
And Krishna, what about you? I mean, how will technology drive the growth in agriculture sector? I mean, how are governments and various organizations making use of this tech?
So I think we are seeing a lot of uptake, not only in India but globally, not only in private sector but also with the implementation organizations like developer agencies and the governments who are coming forward and taking this solution. To give you an example, because of this Ukraine war, there is a shortage of wheat and prices have gone high, and we have been engaged with the Nigeria government to predict wheat in their country much in advance. So they take a decision how much to import basis what is happening in the country. Right. The other example could be, basis this kind of intelligence, can I take a decision of how much fertilizer to be imported per county based on the how the farmers are taking the crops in that county, right? And this is all driven by the disruption of the supply chain, because the prices have gone high and you need to be very optimal in making your decisions. So I think technology is definitely going to be forefront, and you'll see the much bigger growth driven by this.
Be prepared for a lot of tech jargon, because now we're going to talk about how agri-tech players are actually transforming the way agriculture is traditionally being done across all stages of the value chain in agriculture. I mean, for instance, data analytics and machine learning play a crucial role in improving productivity. Then there are platforms and data-driven solutions for price discovery, price transparency that empower farmers by providing access to real-time information on both input and output prices. You have imaging, and how can AI technology stay far behind? They are actually utilized to monitor crop quality, allowing for automation in grading output and yield classification itself. There are platforms for produce traceability that enhance visibility and transparency across the supply chain. We have robotics and drones. They've emerged as valuable tools in agriculture as well. And farming as a service, FaaS, can optimize equipment utilization and reduce idle time. So much efficiency makes our food quicker, faster, cheaper, and makes the farmer richer.
It does, and so much technology and the amount of money that is chasing it. Let's talk about that. Because funding in this agri-tech sector has been on an impressive growth trajectory, and that is reflecting in the increased amount of interest and confidence in the industry. So from $187 billion in 2018, you've seen funding go up all the way to $1.2 billion as of 2021. Then, of course, we know there was a funding winter, and funding came down to about $1.1 billion. And as in the first 6 months of this year, we've seen about $161 billion flow in across various deals that have happened despite the macro headwinds. In fact, agri-tech was one of the better performing sectors when you look at the startup ecosystem overall in terms of funding.
Well, we spoke about a lot of funding, we spoke about a lot of technology. So let's ask, what are the key areas in which tech is changing the way agri is done? Krishna, could you explain with an example of how Cropin is partnering with the government in the Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana?
If I take an example of working with the government in terms of Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana, the biggest challenge was to underwrite this risk, right? How do you make this payment faster when the crop, the farmer crops has failed? It used to take 2 to 3 years to establish that, right? And by then, farmer needed that money much earlier than that. Now, government wanted to infuse this technology to monitor this remotely using satellite technology. That can we model this yield prediction and the crop health and the estimation of the acreages on those crops in that insurance unit, and that can help us to take a faster decision, and then farmer can see the payouts much faster if the crop fails in that direction. It also reduced the cost of what government is spending to do the crop cutting experiment to establish these yields. So in a crop season of when the harvest comes, it's a 2 month window to establish the crop cutting experiments, and we almost do 10 million such crop cut across the country. And it's a huge cost. So every crop cut will cost you, let's say, 1,000 to 1,500 rupees. Right, and multiply that by 10 million of those crop cuts, which has to done across the country to establish the yield and then the payouts to happen. And then there are their own nuances of wrong data, influence data, which was interfering with the payouts happening to those growers and taking a lot of time. But with the implementation of technology, you are bringing down the cost by more than 40 to 50% in the phase 1. And then also accelerating the pace of making this payment faster to the grower when the crop fails, right? So these are some of the value you can extract from technology and the scale and the fast-paced solutioning you can bring to the table.
Well, it is all pervasive indeed. But Shashank, when you try to reinvent a sector like agriculture, especially as large as the one that we have, it's a huge task because there are so many stakeholders. So it's not just a matter of tech. it is also a matter of influencing behavior change. How has that happened over the last few years?
Slightly early as a green shoot, but I think that is something which is definitely a point of inflection. I think in last 2-3 years, different stakeholders have realized their respective expertise. So it's not like that, that any single organization or institution, whether it's government or private player, and within private player, whether a large conglomerate or a startup can solve the entire problem standalone. So I think last few years people have realized their core expertise, and now people are making up their mind to focus on their expertise and at the same time being collaborative with other complementary skill sets. So, and that's where I think most of the agri-tech startups working, which is more towards the last mile, which is more towards the behavioral change of various stakeholders, whether it's farmers or middlemen or the SMEs, and that's where I think the agri-tech has a lot to contribute and a very important role to play.
All right, we have lots more to talk about, but we have to take a short break. So hold your thoughts there, because we're going to return with what works, what doesn't work, the yays and the nays.
And of course, as always, the bigger question, will agri-tech transform India into a farming powerhouse? More on that after a short break. You're watching us here on Mad About Markets, and we're reporting to you live from the case that we made in CNBC-TV18.
Well, let it come in, yes.
Yes, we're standing in our little, artificially created agri-tech farm itself, so to say. But, jokes apart, we're talking about the opportunities and challenges in India's agri-tech sector. In a segment, as we always call, yays and nays. We have the two tractors. I'll go with the yay tractor first.
Go for it.
All right. So, the biggest one, of course, the thing that we talk about very often on Mad About Markets, the big transformative impact that COVID-19 has driven in the industry, and agri-tech has been,
and agri-tech has been no exception. But when we talk about agriculture in India, at the end of the day, it is still a very fragmented market, and there are a large number of intermediaries, countless stakeholders, which makes the process itself quite complex.
The common platform that binds everyone, whether they're fragmented or not, is the internet. Rising internet and smartphone penetration in India brings everyone together.
Well, but for that internet penetration, even though it is increasing, gaining the farmer's attention and trust requires some level of offline presence as well.
I completely agree with you. I mean, offline presence is important, and what is also important is rising consumer awareness, which is actually happening, and people are willing to pay for good quality products.
People are willing to pay for good quality products, but what we're seeing is a decline in the share of educated and digital savvy young farmers, because they don't want to be in farming anymore. They want to, progress and move out to urban centers and cities.
Guess who wants to be in farming? It's the private capital. They want to invest in agri-tech and the opportunities that agri provides.
But for all of this put together, at the end of the day, we're so dependent on rain gods and macro variability, right? So that will always be a huge factor for the agriculture sector.
Well, where the rain gods can't help, the government gods can help. There has been a multi-pronged government push to actually go ahead and double farm income. Agri-tech will be one of those drivers.
But what we spoke about at the start, right? The productivity is low, farmer incomes are low, so affordability, that is one of the challenges to tackle before we really see a spurt in this sector.
Let's take it there, right to our guest itself. Krishna, I mean, we've spoken about the opportunities and challenges. What, according to you, are the key challenges on tech delivery, cost fragmentation of land holdings, too many stakeholders?
I think there are multifold challenges, and I'll start with the digital literacy of this whole segment itself, and also the cost of delivery, right? So right now I think in the country like India, there should be a public-private partnership, because there is a hand-holding required for the penetration of this technology, and the government is doing a lot on that that front also. And also the people who are interacting with the growers, like agronomists or government departments or agriculture departments, their people also need to adopt this technology and take it to this last mile, right? And that I see that happening today with all the infrastructure which we have in the country to support the agriculture. That digital has been the first pillar, and they are making an effort to not only the growers but also every stakeholder who is engaged in the agriculture to adopt digital, right? And that is also happening with his own pace, and with this whole penetration of technology, internet, smartphones, easy solutions, which is actionable in terms of when it goes to in hand of farmers, are also increasing, right? So I think it has to be a collaborative approach, right, from the tech companies who are building solutions, the implementation partners who are on the ground working closely with the growers, and then helping them to adopt this kind of a technology.
All right, so literacy, of course, and the cost of delivery. But Shashank, let me bring you in as well. What do you think are the challenges in digitizing this entire agriculture ecosystem, and the cost of mechanizing this? Has that been a barrier?
I would say too many stakeholders for sure. However, let's say if I break into two parts, which is the major factor towards the adoption side. So let's say if you go from agri-business or maybe from one end of food chain to another, which is mostly from the consumer side to farmer side, I would say where the overall agri-tech fraternity is as on date, till the last mile, you will not find problem of digitization and adoption. For example, again, in the context of DeHaat, where we have been running our physical DeHaat centers, it's a franchise network which is run by someone from the local community and acts as a point of transaction for the farmers in a catchment area of 3 to 5 kilometers. So probably I think as far as digitization or adoption is concerned, I think we have solved up to that point. Considering all our more than 11,000 DeHaat centers are digitized, those micro entrepreneurs or the DeHaat center owners, they have been using our DeHaat business application. Entire our warehouse, in fact, that's digitized. You can see each and every single SKU of inventory, whether it's input or output, it's live. So I think up to the last mile, the adoption and the digitization, I think it has been solved by the agri-tech players. But when it comes about the farmer side or the farm side, I think that's where still, I think the overall development or overall the work at the early stage. But as I said earlier, I think it will take its own time.
Let's go to the bigger, most important question of the discussion that we're having right now. And that is, will agri-tech transform India into a farming powerhouse? Krishna, Shashank, your thoughts?
So, the technology is going to play a key role in uplifting the yield or the quality from the nation point of view. If you compare the productivity per hectare in India for the crops versus developed countries, you'll find a lot of difference, right? Almost like half of global production index. Now, if you look at the agri-tech companies who are bringing a lot of solutions and actually trying to tackle those problems, either modeling the risk, either modeling the risk at the farm unit level, tackling the climate change, helping the farmer to change the behavior from the package of practices point of view, which will again give you a much better yield and much better quality from the same farm, and you can compete globally as well with those numbers. And I think that's the direction India is also moving. And with the reconfiguration of supply chain, consumer behavior is also changing in terms of the food consumption. These are all driving factors towards it. And I think from the technology point of view, from solutioning point of view in agriculture, we are in the right direction.
I'll break into two parts. You wait for 2-3 years and you will see the size of the overall agri-tech players. I think 3 years ago, I think people have been asking about that whether agri-tech can go to a certain stage, certain scale, certain growth or not. In fact, and as on date, you will find many agri-tech startups doing maybe more than annual business of 1,000 crore already. So you wait for 2-3 years. In fact, you will get the answer towards the scale, growth, along with the profitability. But the second part of the question, standalone, no. I think standalone, forget about agri-tech, standalone, nobody can solve the India or the global issues. But I think the construct of agri-tech is to be a strong, catalyst towards the new or towards the next green revolution of India. So idea or the intent of the agri-tech is basically, to create the prototypes, to create the model, whether it's last mile, whether it's farmers financing, whether it's export, whether it's bio innovations, and basically, encouraging everyone literally, whether the institution or the policy makers, to use and to refer those prototypes, basically to inculcate in their own respective region and to basically scale it up, for a common cause.
Always good to have a healthy debate. I'm glad to hear that opposing point of view from both of you. Yes, there is a long way to go. But on that note, Krishna and Shashank, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts here. And with that, we've come to an end of this special episode. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week.
Keep farming.